I was just curious to see what would happen if I talked a little bit about meditation today. Meditation, mostly how to do it and what it isn't, I think is kind of important. I don't know what it isn't. Maybe what it is and isn't for me. Okay. So meditation, what it is and isn't for me and how to do it. Okay, the easy one. This is very easy. How do you do it? There are If you were to ask me how to read a book, I could describe to you how to read, and I would probably have to teach you some things, right? An alphabet and a language being chief among them. But the long and short of it is you open up a book and you start where you're supposed to start and you follow the characters with your eye, and your brain translates the characters into ideas. So, without getting into any particular language, which would be sort of like a religion or discipline, and without getting into the nuts and bolts of that, I think you can describe meditation in a similar manner, and that it might actually be better than in my analogy. um, so here's my instructions: sit in a relaxed, alert position, your eyes, let's just say closed, but unfocused also works. It's probably best to just say close your eyes. You don't want to obstruct your breathing at all. So if you're familiar with yoga breathing or breathing for various disciplines, learning proper breathing, breathing as so if I imagine my area here, when I breathe in, it fills up that area. This might feel backwards to you, in going like that, but it's filling up that area in my center, in my belly from down here, and it puffs out, right, and it drives my shoulders back. So my ribs are coming up on the in breath. In the out breath, that's clearing out, emptying out, becoming concave. Right, my shoulders will still be back. And so this area is emptying out. So this is belly breathing you'd learn in voice or yoga. Right. Not important that I'm hissing. I'm just so you can hear it. The reason I'm showing you that is that in a sitting posture in a lot of meditations, you can't be doing a kind of breathing that's sort of like kinking up your apparatus. So the way you breathe is actually pretty important. It has to be really natural, like as natural as when you're sleeping, where you can completely ignore it and it just happens on its own. So that's kind of the nature of that. Also, erect spine, and if you just think of the classic meditative sitting, that's what you want. It looks a bit stiff, but you have to understand that you've been sitting in this posture for days and days and days, in real time, a few hours a day, 1 hour a day for a long time. You're going to get pretty good at sitting in that posture. You'll kind of fall into it. It'll kind of look like this graceful, statue pose if you do it for a long time. But it's really just you're sitting in whatever posture will keep you awake and relaxed and alert, with a rigid spine and comfortable breathing. So you can lay down on your back in bed and meditate, but you'll fall asleep because it's too cozy. And you could probably meditate standing up, but you'll probably fall over eventually because you're going to relax so many things. So it's specifically choosing the sitting posture because of it maximizes your ability to keep your consciousness awake while penetrating into deeper and deeper layers of the self and the subconscious, and even your brain waves are slowing down, going to slower, deeper places. All of this requires you to access sort of a sleep state and sort of not a sleep state. So as far as the posture and everything is concerned, that's all you really need to know. There's all these sort of mudras and breathing through one nostril and breathing techniques and speeds. Sure, as you do this for years and years, those things will become known to you, and you'll practice them and you'll try them and you'll see for yourself. But in my instructions, I'm saying don't worry about any of that. If you even need a mantra, Om, There's a mantra. Om. It could be Applebee's. You can have any mantra you want. And I'm not like trying to shit on spiritual traditions. There's a value to all of these things. I'm just saying I want to get into meditation right now, and I don't want to be scared off from it. Sit in a relaxed, alert position with your eyes closed for as long as you can. Do it every single day for as long as you can. Can is an important keyword. You might think you can do it for a half hour a day or an hour a day or 2 hours, but you can't. Not coming from nothing. Why would you think that? It's like, I'm going to go from not ever exercising to going to the gym every day. That's just insane. That's not how habits work. So rather than doing an hour once a week or something, or trying really hard for a short time and then burning out, I recommend have a daily sit and have it be ludicrously short, like 1 minute. Because that is better, in my opinion, than 160-minute sit every 60 days. But different, but because I don't believe that that's how it will occur. I believe that if you do the latter, if you say I'm going to have a sit every 60 days, you'll just fall out of that habit. It's not a very good habit. It's not very sticky. If you say you're going to do a minute every day, you'll probably start doing a little bit longer, a little bit like when just preparing for a meditation is like a minute. So now it's 2 minutes. Like, okay, I might as well do 5 minutes. And you'll probably find that it's not so hard to get up to 10 to 15 minutes after doing it for a little while. Well, 10 and 15 minutes is actually, that's pretty good. If you can do 10, 15 minutes a day, you'll see benefits like pretty quickly. But I would recommend half hour to an hour every day. And I know that's pretty intense, but try to work up to that. More than that, sure, that's your best bet is to do as much as you can, but at that point you're looking at it being less of like a hobby, and that's kind of your commitment. It's claimed quite often that if you really want to experience what meditation has to offer fully, you do have to fully dedicate your life and your full attention to it. That's just sort of something that we find. I don't know if that's a fact or if it's true, but even in the story of the Buddha, there's this sort of dogged determination, like I'm either gonna die or become enlightened. So if you want this enlightenment thing, that's something we'll talk about. If you want that thing, you have to really sacrifice. You sacrifice yourself to the practice. You become meditation and lose yourself in that and become something different. I've never done that. I have never dedicated my entire life to meditation, and I am also not an enlightened master. I guess that would be cool, but I wouldn't define it as really the main thing I want out of my life. So now this is where this is kind of where I think it gets interesting, is talking about what that is. You meditate to become enlightened. Is that so? Probably. That's probably my main reason. Fear of death, concern over mortality and reincarnation led me to feel like I needed to learn meditation, and that the only way out of that predicament was to attain enlightenment. I'm using that word right now because you're familiar with it. I'll use different words for it once we get into that track. So that was what led me to what I would now describe as just simply Zen practice. So how does that work? If you're experiencing like existential dread and terror and mortal terror and just fear of the nature of reality itself, it's important to pick apart what exactly it is. People often misdiagnose midlife crises and just ordinary grieving periods and periods of adjustment with existential crises and mortal crises. These are very different things, different moving parts, but the type of mortal fear I was experiencing, it was not a sense that I was in danger. It was that the entire deal of being alive is a crock of shit. And that's a different thing from saying like my own personal life conditions are unfavorable, so I'm unhappy about it. It's to say that I'm concerned that the universe is results in suffering for intelligent life forms. So that's a different thing. But that's the sort of thing that may lead to a Zen practice, and it may come from a much healthier place. For a lot of people, it comes from experimenting with psychedelics and learning that culture is intertwined with meditation culture. And so, okay, if this thing can blow my mind like this, then what's this really all about? What if I could get there without drugs? That seems perfectly valid, and I think that's true. Although it's important not to mistake put the cart before the horse, so to speak. The way I see that is entheogens are sort of breaking pieces of your brain, or inhibiting, let's say, so that this unfiltered infinite consciousness can occur. So it is not the same as getting there with a sober, rational mind, or having the capacity to get there without an altered brain chemistry. In fact, you could even kind of make a logical argument that by using the drug to get there, you are making it more difficult to get there without the drug. You could make the reverse argument as well. We just don't know the answer to this. But you come to identify the transcendent realm with drug use, which is not appropriate. There's some overlap there, but they're not. Prophetic visions are not caused by drugs, nor are drugs created to inspire prophetic visions. It's just sort of a weird coincidence. You can have visions without drugs, for sure. I can do that. It's doable. Many people can do it. It's not even very impressive. And yes, just like tripping balls on acid. Yes. Except that you don't feel like you're going crazy. You feel like you're quite sane and with it and rational. And in fact, you kind of feel like your ordinary waking state is sort of pathological, concerned with things that don't really matter, making mountains out of molehills, which is the reflection upon the ego from the enlightened state. I don't have a strong opinion either way about psychedelics, other than just to say that they are not necessary they're not necessary for meditative or spiritual practice. They may be helpful and they may be harmful. I'm not really ready to say either way, but I will say that I have used them. So I just don't really know. I've also found that when I get to those transcendent states, it's never on. It's through a long period of discipline and not doing any inebriating substances whatsoever, and gaining an incredible sensitivity to my own mind and body. It is definitely not. It's definitely a different thing getting there by simply taking a drug into your body, and then you're there for several hours, and it's sort of, you remember it later. But getting there through practice, it's like you're not there at any particularly pronounced time, nor are you out of it. There's a much more ease in, and then sort of a plateau, and then an ease out that might be 10 minutes, it might be 3 hours, I think I maxed out at maybe like 2 weeks. I would say maybe 2 weeks of this plateau of it. Probably the easiest, simplest way, most straightforward way to describe it. It was like being awake, but also the part of your brain that is dreaming was on also. So like, I mean, it kind of sounds like being insane, but there was nothing wrong. That's kind of important. There's nothing wrong with my logical process. I was talking to people. I could perform mathematical operations. There's nothing inhibited. but I was manifesting what I would call dream content in reality around me. And it wasn't confusing what was what. It was just I was experiencing this other layer with reality. And it was sort of revealing itself to always be there, not that I was projecting it or imagining it or finding it, but that it's always there, and I'm not normally tuned into being aware of it. Just the fact that getting there requires a lot of cessation of mind altering substances, in my case, from what I've learned, just in my own experience, I have a lot of suspicion about psychedelics, and a lot of suspicion about people who are practice spirituality and are addicted to drugs, or drugs are a large part of the practice. I'm just saying suspicion is warranted there. We don't really know yet, but I'm going to approach it with an either or attitude. I'm definitely neither pro nor anti entheogens. I'm pro meditation with or without. So what happens? What happens when you meditate? When you meditate for the first time? So let's say that you're doing a 15 to half hour sit every day. So number one, when I usually talk to people who are just doing it for the first time, and actually I'll give you an example. I was with a 9-year-old girl, and I'm meditating. I want to learn how to meditate. Okay. What do you do? Well, sit and pay attention okay. He sits down. Now what? Okay, now do that for 5 minutes. I was trying to think, how long do you think she can go? 5 minutes. Give that a try. So she's really excited to see me, and she can't even sit still for 15 seconds. So sitting down, all right, and then gets up and runs around us. And it's like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't figure it out. But that's, as an adult, you're going to do that, is what I'm saying. And that's not a negative result. It's an experiment. Can I sit and meditate for an hour? No, I can't. I get up in 5 minutes and do something different. That's not a bad outcome. You're getting information. So in a sense, it's almost like, well, is that a problem that you can't sit still for 1 minute? Not when you're a 9-year-old girl, but for me, yeah. It seems like if I'm really in control here, I should be able to stop thinking for an hour, consciously, deliberately. Sure, seems like something I ought to be able. And so don't hit yourself with a wooden stick every time your mind strays. That's old school. But recognize, I sit here for 2 minutes and now my mind's racing, my emotions are yammering away, my body wants me to get up and move. This is data, and this is you getting better. That's a sign that you're improving, because now you have awareness of those. Next step, use that awareness to figure out how to get rid of them so that you can simply sit there without thought. So if you get to the point where you can sit still for an hour without thinking, you're there, you're in. If you can do it for 15 minutes, you'll probably start having some pretty epic experiences that you don't even imagine are possible if you've never done that before. So the point is, don't get discouraged and say, I can't do this because my mind wanders. That's what you're doing. You're practicing stopping your mind from wandering, or making the wandering stop by acknowledging it. It's complicated to talk about, and that's why instructions are always so bad. You keep paying attention, and the intrusions keep occurring, and that's normal. And you don't get to the deep state, and that's normal. And so you don't want to be a state chaser. You're just keep coming back, keep sitting and paying attention, and if anything else arises, just pay attention to it, let it go away. Don't engage it. Don't attach to it, but let it occur. There's a lot of different instructions that you can give from there that are just really basic, but as long as you're doing that, I don't really think you need more instructions. Or at least for several years, you'll have plenty of time in the interim. You'll be meditating that whole time. You'll probably be reading a book here and there. You'll probably be having conversations. You'll probably learn more elaborate technical things. But yeah, if you can sit and pay attention for a half hour to an hour every day, you'll start seeing the value and the benefit of it. So I do plan to actually guide meditations cognitively more than anything else, with the understanding that that is something that you're supposed to listen through in a meditation or two and then do on your own. It's not, you don't want to become hooked on listening to something while you meditate, unless it's just to drown other things out. But I am also, I guess what I'm saying is, this is why I'm being so simplistic with my instructions, is because I think that other things get in the way. The whole point is to not get distracted. So what I see more often than not, honestly, so you meditate. Yeah. So my meditation is I ride on a bike. It's like, okay, that's a different thing. It's not exactly the same thing. So don't, you do all that if you want. Do other stuff if you want, but just understand, like, there's a certain type of mindful meditation that is just you sitting and paying attention, and that may very well result in the goal, the supposed goal. And other approaches may or may not result in that, but I can only speak for mindfulness. I think that is sufficient. So mantras, mudras, guided visualizations, affirmations, I do think these are good and valuable, but in what I'm espousing to you, I think that they're distractions, especially when you're just starting out, and that is a way of your mind to keep the talking going, the thinking, which is the very thing you're trying to get rid of, the ego, the script. And you can be in a relationship with someone talking to you like you're watching TV. I think it completely defeats the purpose of Zen meditation, which is to explore inner worlds and silent worlds and things arising within yourself. But instead, you're saying, okay, meditate me, external world, make the sounds that put me into a trance. That's just a different thing. I'm not saying it's bad, but for the Zen meditation with the purpose of attaining samadhi, or whatever tradition it's described in, but that thing that makes you feel free from mortality issues, that won't probably be the result of you convincing yourself or somebody else convincing you that you've gotten there. It would be from you directly experiencing that state of awareness from a first-hand perspective in the present moment. And I don't think there's really much of a way around that. The terrain of it is laid out, it's very consistent with Ken Wilber's bodies, the way he's looks at spiritual bodies with a gross body, psychic, subtle, causal, and non-dual body. And really, more simplistically, just gross, subtle, and causal. Okay, so waking awareness is gross realm. That's what this is. Beta and alpha brainwaves, human interactions, the world of distractions, samsara, illusion. Subtle body being the inner mental world, the world of dreams and visions and illumination. The causal being the deepest, having a singular content that is not content. And this is where causal is very impossible to convey with words. And so that's why I'm very hesitant, and everyone's very hesitant. If you have any awareness of it, it's words get in the way, just like how I'm saying. a guided meditation definitely won't get you there, nor will you convincing yourself with words, because it's not in the realm of words. It's like in this separate. It's not knowledge. It's not something you file away, and that's important for a lot of reasons. The subtle does give knowledge. You can come out of dreams and you can write them down, and you can discuss the visions you've had and the creatures and entities that you've interacted with and what you've learned. But causal is a very different thing. It almost like annihilates your concept of a self and a world and subjectivity and free will, and very, very reversal. But it's that would be where the enlightened state is found. That is where the Buddha attains enlightenment, is by being fully into the causal as both a state and a stage of realization. But with that, extremely important, and I think it's misunderstood a lot, ubiquitously misunderstood, is that you get, let's even say you get to that causal state in meditation or by accident or whatever, you get into the enlightened, illuminated state of liberation from suffering, oneness, the unmanifest. You get to that causal state. Well, what happens next is you come out of that state and you are back here in your normal state. So there's a tendency that people have that state once or for a year or for some amount of time, and then they are the enlightened master and they go and teach, but they aren't still in that state anymore. A more pathetic example is people going to Burning Man and taking a drug and having a drugged out, maybe even a very genuine causal state, maybe. But then what happens is you come out of that state and you're at Burning Man in the manifest with a bunch of people, and you return home, and now you're not even in the same community that even allows things like that to happen, and you're going around telling everybody that you experienced ego death. Well, who's telling them that if the ego's dead? Who's so excited to tell everybody about that? Ego death is a stupid expression. We'll probably keep using it. I mean, I'm not going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, but no, the ego ceases. You forget it's going on. It doesn't die. It dies like when you put a bullet in your head. There's a lot of confusion about ego and the transcendence of ego, to where it's like villainized. Ego is you. You're not a villain. You're a good person. So don't get confused. The problem is the attachment to it and the belief that your entire the entire universe is your ego experiencing your life. And so there's a great deal of worry and fear that will discontinue or be sabotaged. But it is simply by backing away from the ego and looking at it in the larger context that we have that sort of artifact of the enlightened experience, not necessarily knowledge of it itself, but just an artifact of it, is to realize the insignificance of the ego, as well as the significance of a person or a conscious entity who is free from ego, and what could be achieved by a creature that was free from ego. So both of those things. And finally, how pointless it would be to do all of that. Because, I mean, let's even say, you're the person who egoless, transcended ego, and then save the world. Why though? Who does that matter to? It matters to your ego and the egos of everyone else, and that's confined to this environment. And it might have gone another way, and it might have gone this way, but it went that way. And you're the person who did it. So why did you do that? Maybe to feel proud of yourself. Maybe because you wanted to live in a utopian world, but those are selfish desires. So it's not really, you don't really feel that compulsion from the enlightened state to transform everyone's beliefs and transform the world. It's more like, oh, this is what actual perception is like. why doesn't everyone come on in? So that's the reason I bring all that up, is to recognize that your goals are very heavily dependent on whether you are expecting to get into gross realm stuff, subtle realm stuff, causal realm stuff. Those have different instructions. They lead to different outcomes. But if you simply sit and pay attention in a relaxed, alert position, you will rise through them in a wavy way. You will eventually get there. It may take a very long time, and it may take more discipline than you ever put into it. So, as I was saying, in my case, I don't know if I'm not really planning to be in a causal state for, a stage of causal awareness for a long period of time. So what's the point of meditating? I think is a perfectly valid question. Well, there's a lot of ground in between the causal state and the gross waking state. There's a lot in there. I've been in there. It's very interesting and fulfilling and rewarding material to go into. So it's just that the causal state is so world-shattering and so significant that it's placed in this supreme importance category. But that isn't to say that for the many years of meditation before getting there, that everything you're doing is pointless or unrewarding. Quite the contrary. My practice I would describe as what I've just described, occurring over the course of maybe 5 years, where I would meditate for 1 hour every day, and I also did yoga, and I also predominantly abstained from all drug use. There were little moments in there where I didn't, but that was pretty much the narrative that was pretty much how I did it. And I was using HoloSync, which is binary beat technology. Might work, it might not. I just felt like it seemed to be working for me. The idea is it plays one tone in one ear and another tone in the other. It's not distracting. It's just like a really low hum of which is stacked under white noise anyways. So it just kind of like very little sound. And if anything, it just kind of cancels out any sound that might be ambient in the room. And then they're slightly out of tune from one another, like actually slightly different pitches, if you know music. And what that'll do is, like if you have a pitch at like 40 hertz and then a pitch at like 41 hertz, and you hear them both at once, your brain can't hear both of those frequencies at once because they clash with one another, so it can't really comprehend what it's hearing. So you'll actually hear a 1 hertz kind of overtone, which is the product of 40 and 41. You literally just the difference between them you hear as a frequency, as a modulation. Okay, so that's how it works when you hear two notes that are out of tune. And so by putting one in each ear, that overtone, that difference between them, the pitch difference, it seems to be the case that your brain will naturally sync up to that pitch difference. So if you wanted your brain waves to be at concentrating at 10 hertz, 20 hertz cycles per second, 10, 20 hertz, you could play 40 hertz here, 50 hertz here. And so in your brain, in trying to make sense of those and hearing a beat frequency between those out of tune pitches, it will create brain waves at 10 hertz, which would be like this very, very deep delta brainwave state. So does that actually work that way? There's evidence that it does. I wouldn't make the claim that it does work. If it doesn't work, it's a darn good placebo, I would say, and it doesn't seem to do any harm. So I do use that HoloSync, which comes with like rain sounds and bowl sounds. So again, I want to avoid any sort of human talking stuff. I want the language to stop. I want to get out of language here in this meditation. And so that's pretty much the entirety of what the practice is. So what then happens? Well, one thing I would describe right offhand is I actually noticed when I stopped meditating, like stress and anxiety came back. And when I am meditating, it's hard to even believe this, but it's like I'm facing the exact same life. But if I've been meditating for quite a while, months maybe, it just doesn't feel as intense anymore in the same way. Like the pressures of life and the disappointments and betrayals, all the little things that happen in life, the drama doesn't hit you as hard. I don't even know how to explain it because it's the exact same life. And it's like you jump into freezing water, all the same physiological reactions occur. It just doesn't seem as problematic is how I would describe it. The sort of slings and arrows, just you have a little more equanimity. It's not like being tough though. It's just like there's the pain, high pain. I don't know how there's. I think it's that recoiling from pain and fear that makes it seem more impressive, and I think that might be why meditation can be so good for the psyche and the emotional being and dealing with coping and grieving and fear. I don't really know the why of it, but I just had noticed that it greatly reduced my sense of stress and anxiety, almost to the point where it seems like when I am meditating, I have none of it, and when I'm not meditating, I have a normal amount. So why don't I meditate all the time? Why would I ever stop then? That's a very complicated thing to get into, but it's the same as anything, habits are hard to keep if you have to dedicate time and energy and effort into them. So no stress. One of the most intriguing things is the nighttime starts really opening up to you, which is in my case, I was able to develop with actually very little effort, full dream recall and consistent lucid dreaming, out-of-body experiences, astral projection. You have to qualify all that, but I'm just putting it out there. These were occurring on their own just through meditating and journaling and making it a conscious intention to do dream work. I was having altered states. Some of them, I don't really know how I would describe them. I don't come from a tradition that makes sense of all that. But yeah, if you meditate a lot, stuff happens that's really hard to explain. Like you might kind of have perceptual changes, seeing colors differently, being hyper-focused on certain things, finding that certain coincidences happen a lot more, being more fearless in your interactions with people, being able to go to deeper places emotionally, being more creative and clever in anything that you have to do where those would be the case, greater sense of equanimity and appreciation, care for others, reduction of resentments and grudges. So a lot of things that you would just categorize as kind of classically religious values, I suppose, or just humanist values. They kind of occur naturally, but definitely the alienation and differentiation of former concepts of selfhood, the idea of what the self is changes pretty enormously. Outside of the sleep and dream work, confined strictly, if we're talking strictly about things that occur within the meditation and not surrounding it, or in the sleep phase. This stuff's so hard to qualify. I think that there's like milestones, like the first time that I sat a full hour without moving at all was pretty impressive, even though it doesn't seem very impressive, but it does. The subjective feeling of it is very different because you didn't move your body at all. It stays in a much more asleep state. Another one being you get to a point where you actually forget your physical body. So just like when you go to sleep, you just forget that your body's there because you're not paying attention, you're asleep, you're under it. You can do that in meditation, and so you drop your body mind, I guess. The physical sense that you're here in this body. I can feel my body inside here. You just kind of go beneath that, and you stop feeling it because you're not paying attention to it, just like when you go to sleep. And so without that there, you still have a visual field, so it gets filled up with vision, with stuff, imaginary dream stuff. It kind of depends on how deep you're into it, or whether it's bodily in nature. Very hard to talk about, but yeah, it gets to a point where you're no longer pretty. Maybe within a year or two, I think you kind of get to a place where you're no longer seeing what's happening as you sitting on the floor anymore. It's like you're in this different place. I don't really know what happens after that, but again, I stress that this is with no tradition, no teacher. I just read a few books on meditation, and I did it semi-seriously for several years. I'm not closed off to ever having like a teacher or a tradition or anything like that. It just hasn't really worked out, and it hasn't really fit into my lifestyle. So I'm pretty satisfied with what happens when I do it completely on my own. I have tried to enter into social groups that are meditative in nature, and I haven't had much quality results or success with that, but I'm always open to it. I think it would be great to accomplish that, to be a part of something that was bigger than me. With the results being, after a couple of years, constant consciousness through the dreaming state, but only tiny bit into the deep sleep state. I would not say constant consciousness into the deep sleep state, non-REM. Meditation practice characterized by feeling a lot more comfortable in it, being able to do it for an hour, and dropping the body, mind, and going into a vision place with somewhat seemingly other entities or helpers, but not going a whole ton deeper than that much. And a lot of kind of quirky odds and ends, which we can get into in other places, of just sort of strange things that happen to people when they meditate. I have no idea whether, I didn't really have any goal in this one, so I've just talked about meditation a little bit. I think the goal is to explain how to do it.